Welcome to our collaborative approach on a traditional tatami room in Tokonoma. This is a project that we completed about 15 years ago. It's a Japanese-inspired design and build, and featured this tatami room. Initially, this room had 8 tatamis, so a bigger space, and went back to the rear wall without the Tokonoma. The client used it as a traditional space, a sunroom. The back has bifold doors and opens onto the rear garden and deck. Has Shoji, perimeter Shoji, that gets natural light and shadowing through to the space. And the room, over that time, I think they've looked at how they've used the room and thought this latest rendition would make the space suit their needs and use of the room better. So we've come back and collaborated with our client again, and to create this Tokonoma. The space has a perimeter American oak flooring that runs right through the house. The original design incorporated the Shoji tracks, which have been rebaited into the floor. That's a bit of a signature element we try to bring into a Shoji installation, where the flooring that's being used in the room, we run the bottom groove and try and really integrate that track with the main floor. The ceiling track, again traditional timber tracks, is in this case rebaited into the ceiling, and the plaster finishes flush with the face of the board. So it gives you quite a simple, clean detail, and sort of ties in the tradition, but sort of in a modern interpretation. So that still remains. The Shoji works the same way. The bifold doors open up to the rear garden. The garden has Japanese elements with a bento box garden, opens onto a little plunge pool at the back, and quite a tranquil private space. And on a day like today, you've got a lot of natural light coming in, nice shadowing, and a nice space to sort of open up and incorporate external and internal elements. The Tokonoma is a traditional Japanese focal point of a room, or traditionally a tea room or tatami mat room. This is our interpretation of a Tokonoma in a more contemporary space, and we've collaborated with our clients to create this space. They have a love of Ikebana, traditional Japanese flower arrangements, and I think that sort of ties in nicely with bringing outdoor elements again into an internal space. With a lot of Japanese design, they play with levels. I think when you come into this house, we've got a genkan, which is a lower area. It's at street level, it's at footpath level. You come in, you take your shoes off, and you step up a level, and that signifies you've entered the house and you've left your shoes at the door. The Tokonoma again plays with levels, so there's a raised level that signifies a special space. In this case, I think the Tokonoma is really a space to, I think, express one's artistic interest. In this case, the client creates the Ikebana arrangements themselves, so it's a great space to be able to do that. The use of this room has a modern interpretation, where we've used Shoji in the base that's backlit, so at night it can be like a subtle night light, and these spaces open up And we have top and bottom lighting on a dimmer, so you could really play with that space. It becomes like a night light at night. The Tokonoma is a space that I think can be used for special displays of artwork or creative interests or creative pursuits. In this case, our client studies Ikebana, and I think a great opportunity to display the seasonal arrangement. And here we are with a beautiful arrangement here, and a great position to sit back and view that arrangement. The Tokonoma traditionally has specific proportions. My understanding of those proportions is you often have a 2/3, 1/3 break. We've done a lot of scaling and looking at other examples of that over the years, and tried scaling over drawings and photos and to come up with our own view on those proportions. The main post here is often a celebrated piece of timber, sometimes bamboo, sometimes it's a natural trunk of a tree that shows its the bend of the branch or the trunk. In this case, we've got a recycled piece of timber, Victorian timber, that is then used throughout. We've brought the American oak into the bottom of the raised platform, so that sort of ties in with the floor. The main base here is Tassie oak, and the Kumiko layout gives you sort of some groundiness to that design. There is a modern take on this space, and this room can also be used as a TV room. I think often TVs are focal points in homes, and in this case we've housed it in the base of the Shoji cabinet, so that pops up and can transform the spot into a TV viewing. A nice sort of subtle small TV, doesn't dominate the space when it's up, and can be hidden away when not in use. So that's I think like a modern interpretation, but respectfully disappears and doesn't dominate the space. The shelving in this area, simple decorations and expressions of artistic interests. And I think the space is also, I've chosen a very subtle textured wallpaper. You see a lot of this in Japan. Very tactile, simple, earthy, organic sort of colours. And I think that's another aspect of this space where there's a big focus on natural materials. You've got the Tatami flooring, which is like a rush reed that's woven. When that's harvested, it's very green, and when they first make the mats, it's also hasn't dried and lost colour. It's green, and then over time it develops this beautiful golden sort of hues, and again very organic natural material. We've got the rice paper that's we bring that in from Japan. You get that beautiful light transfusion through paper, and on an exterior Shoji area, you get, as the light passes and the day progresses, you get shadowing over the Kumiko squares. So I think there's often a play with light behind branches and natural elements outside that are shaded or what's the word? They show up as a shadow over the paper, and you can see that movement with the wind, and again I think it's sort of bringing in, breaking down those boundaries of internal external spaces. The paper at night, again beautiful warm light behind, can really add a subtle warmth to a space at night. Again, subtle lighting in the Tokonoma, more about featuring key elements. There's a light central in here for the Ikebana and the wall hanging scroll, again on these elements. You've got natural timber. I think traditionally a lot of the walls were done in earth and natural organic renders, and a lot of those renders have, you see the straw and you'll see elements of the mix showing through in the textural element of the wall. And I think a lot of the wallpapers now from Japan are using that similar material. You're seeing that makeup in the wallpaper, but it's very subtle. I think it warms a room opposed to a solid colour surface. So natural materials. You've got timber, the rush reed. You've got material borders, wallpaper, light. I don't think we have any stone. And then you've got your display of key seasonal aspects of the garden. The client has a strong connection to Japan, and I think in the early stages of the design for the whole house, there was obviously I think in any design there's a strong collaboration with all parties, and I think that's a really important aspect to highlight. That I think all designs are collaboration, and the more your client's involved in that process, I think the more they feel part of the outcome, and enjoy the space, and I think that's been a big ingredient. And I think it's also designed. I think when you live in a space and you spend time in a space, the way you thought you'd use a space and the way you actually use it can change. And I think the space has adapted accordingly. I think they've been open to making those changes and finding a different solution. So I think traditionally, I think Tokonoma's obviously been a very big part of Japanese homes over a long period of time, and I think traditionally they before electricity, I'm sure Tokonomas obviously didn't have lighting, but they I wonder if they had like candles or other forms of lighting. I'm not sure, but it'd be a good thing to understand. But I think they often, the space is often a focal point of a traditional room, and I think there's often shoji, so I think there's often a lot of natural light coming in to help light a space. But I think the integrated lighting, I think it's more about at night and probably lighting up specific elements, and I think this space would obviously feel very different at night. The external shoji can also be backlit from the lights on the eve, so I think you could sit in here and have a very different feel at night, where you're almost sort of sitting inside a lantern. And then externally, when the space is lit internally, again you get very different looks, internal and external. But I think the lighting, our integration of the lighting is really focused around subtle light. They're all in dimmers. You can highlight and or subtly lit areas as required, and depending on how the room's being used at the time. I think it's always enjoyable having a client that you collaborate with and gel with, and have similar interests, and it makes that collaboration, I think, much more fluid and natural. And I think I think the space is probably testament to that, where we've had someone that appreciates detail and appreciates those design elements, and we've been able to collaborate and create this. We'll probably answer that a whole different other way too, but the question again.
What are you most proud of?
What I'm most proud of?
Personally?
Yeah.
You know?
No, I think probably most proud of a successful collaboration with a client. I think to align with a client where you have similar interests. Obviously, Japanese designs always been a big part of my life. So I think it's nice to have a project where that, especially a room like this that's so traditional and so or based on sort of traditional elements but a modern take. I think it's always a special project. So I think it's nice to collaborate and then see a client using the space and enjoying the space, and it's changing and I think enriching their lives in the way they use the space and the way they live their life. So I think a client that's grown with the house and been not so much brave enough, but I think to be proactive enough to change spaces and develop the spaces to suit their needs. So I think space in a tatami room and or traditional tea room is an important element. I think the Japanese talk about tatami mat sizes to rooms. In Australia we talk about square metres of a home. In Japan they base sizing around tatami mats. Traditionally tatami mats are 900 wide, 1800 long. These are 55mm thick, so the floor's rebatted to accommodate them, so they're finishing flush. This room, and I think a Tokonoma traditionally is also, it takes up space, but it doesn't give this, it actually creates a sense of space. So it's a very narrow footprint it takes up, but I think it actually gives back and adds space to a room. It also gives a focal point to a room. I think those size proportions are always interesting, and we've looked at many projects and tried to work through our own understanding of how dimensions and ratios are used in these spaces. I think typically the alcove is 1/3 to 2/3, in a tatami mat setting it's half tatami, full tatami. Often the enclave will have a tatami base. And I think also with kumiko, the slats within shoji, that ratio is also very interesting. There's so many different ways to design and set out kumiko ratios, and there's a general sense of proportion, but there's no set rule. Like there's huge variety in shape and size and ratio. But I think there's definitely a proportion aesthetic, and I think sometimes that comes even on site, getting a sense of the space as you're building it, and not being I guess set with the pre-existing design to fill the space and be communicative with your client and work through a final design on site. There's elements here too. We've back at the factory, all this joinery's been made in-house. We make the shoji ourselves, using traditional kumiko sizes and methods. So I think it's nice to be involved in that whole process, the design, the manufacturing of the components, and then the on-site installation and build. I think having that whole process approach gives you a lot of control over the finished product. And here it is.